welcome back. Welcome to the Homesteads and Homeschools podcast. I am your host, the Liberty Hippie, here with you for another week. I hope you're ready. I hope you're ready to get into it today, because we're going to get into it. But before we do, head over to homesteadsandhomeschools.com/063 for today's show notes. There's going to be lots of links over there, things that you can do with your kids while you're home. It should be fun. Head over to homesteadsandhomeschools.com/Amazon. Help the show out. There's an affiliate link over there. You click through, buy all the stuff you're going to buy on Amazon. You don't even know that I got a little kickback unless I tell you. And it's not much. But it helps. It helps offset the costs of doing this thing. So when you're going on to Amazon to buy your paper towels and your toilet paper, click through the affiliate link and help me out a little bit there. You can also help out by hitting the subscribe button on your podcatcher. You can leave a review on iTunes, or you can just go ahead and share it on social media. That's always a great way to spread the love, spread it around. Spread that, not the couve. But anyway, today's guest, sure some of you are familiar. You've probably heard the program before, MathBot.com, and we're going to be talking about that today. So let's get into it. Let's go sow those Liberty Seeds with my guest, Mr. JW Weatherman.
Sniffing triangles are my favorite shape. 3 points where 2 lines meet. Toe to toe, back to back, let's go. My love is very late till morning comes. Let's desolate.
My guest today is somebody he's been on my radar for a little while. I've heard of him a few times, and you may have as well. He's created a website called MathBot.com, and he's here today, Mr. JW. Thank you for coming on, taking time out, and talking to us about your story, what you got going on.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me. This is a lot of fun.
No problem, man. So, MathBot's seems like, it's educational. So, what was your education like?
Yeah, I did some private school, mostly public school, and then went on to university and then taught at university a little earlier in my career.
Okay.
So I've definitely had a lot of the traditional thing and been a big part of it. Teaching business and economics at a fairly expensive private university before I realized just what a waste of time it all is.
So how did that go? I guess when did you kind of figure that? I imagine if you're teaching at college, you appreciated the structure of the public school system, the current education system that we have, or were you always kind of skeptical of it? Or
I was in high school. I was one of the kids that really enjoyed stuff like math, and I didn't really like, if I break it down by subject, like I didn't realize that the history that I was being taught was complete garbage for quite a while. I really liked math. Like I liked it enough to where it was fun for me, even though it was being taught really, really terribly. Because I could, I'm like one of the, 5% of kids that gets given all this really annoying work, but I can still see through that to the other side and see how it fits together. So it wasn't a terrible experience for me. And then when I was teaching at the university level, it was an awesome experience for me, because I had, I was newly married. I got to live on campus. It was real cheap. It was, beautiful, cherry trees blossoming and all that sort of stuff. And I didn't have to work terribly hard. And all of the, all the young adults were impressed with me because I was a relatively young professor. So not a lot to complain about. It was years later when I started, I think, just getting smarter and older, and putting things together that I realized just, that I'd kind of been part of something that I'm not really proud of anymore. I think a lot of it was learning history, and seeing all the stuff that I'd been spoon fed, but really the kind of red pill was economics. Like once you grasp economics, it's hard not to see most of what happened as indoctrination into a system that is really just thinly veiled slavery.
Yeah. When did you start learning the economics? You said you were an economics professor?
Yeah, so that the business and economics stuff was mostly traditional, Keynesian economics garbage.
And what spurred you to look beyond that?
Actually, I read a Ron Paul book, and I didn't like the Ron Paul book. This was I don't know, 12, 15 years ago, something like that. But he made a reference to Ludwig von Mises in the back, on the last page or something like that. And I was completely sure that he was full of garbage after reading his book. But then I went and I picked up a copy of Human Action, and that was just a really kind of mind-blowing experience for me reading that, because it's very systematic. You can't really disagree with the guy, right? Like he builds arguments up layer by layer. And it's very well thought out and well articulated. So that was basically it. I mean, I think a lot of people end up working their way up to that. Like when I got done with that book, it was a whole different world for me.
Yeah. So were you able to kind of convey some of those messages, some of those principles to your students, or was it like once you kind of read that, you're like, all right, I'm out. See you later.
I had actually already left like the university life and moved on to working at software companies. So a company like Google and places like that. And I think it was roughly the time where I started branching out and doing my own startups. Was about the time that I read that. So I already had kind of an entrepreneurial bent in my career path. But
all right, fine. So did you was there anything that, like, I guess, what pushed you out of the university world? What was there, like a moment, or was it just kind of you were drawn to that entrepreneurial stuff and it just felt like the time was nigh?
Well, I think a lot of people end up leaving that. Like as I look back over my career, I think I just kind of got promoted out of stuff that was stupid before I realized how stupid it was. So when I left teaching at university, it was just because there was better opportunities, right? People were willing to pay me more money, and it was more fun to go work for a software company than it was to work for a university. But looking back on it, I think what happened is that it's something that happens a lot, and that is, you just have a brain drain from poor quality, low performing, low value sort of places, and that talent gets sucked over to places that are delivering more. So all the people that I know that have been teaching at university for 20 plus years are idiots. I wouldn't hire them. I wouldn't have anything to do with them. At the time, I didn't know that, though. I was fairly young, and it takes a while to figure out how things all fall together. The world's really shiny when you first start out, but
yeah.
But yeah, so I think looking back on it, there university education wasn't always this low quality, but it was probably never very high quality. Textbooks are not the places to get information, and the brightest people, I think, have always probably gotten pulled off into industry. But it has certainly accelerated over the last 20 years to the point where if anybody sends their kid to college now, like I really believe that in 10 years, the fact that you went to college, in 2020, whether you took on debt or not, but certainly if you took on debt, is going to be just seen as like, wow, you weren't that bright. We may still hire you, even though you started university education in 2020, but it's not going to be seen as something that counts in your favor when you're applying for a competitive job.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to that. I think, seeing how education has gone, and, seeing the entrepreneurs that are coming out, people that are coming out and going, learning a trade almost and getting into it. And even now with this coronavirus thing, I think we're going to see a big change in how industry operates and what people expect and what people I don't know, are willing to accept as acceptable, but like it's okay not to have a college degree, because what does that actually mean anymore? And I think we're being exposed to some of those ideas, but
yeah, it's only a couple of years ago, I think, that Facebook and Google finally dropped their requirement for, and they were one of the last holdouts because they could be, because they just were making so much money that they could basically say, if you don't have a college degree, don't apply. They always made exceptions. They'd still take interns out of high school if you're real bright, but it was a way to kind of eliminate just a lot of applicants. But they even dropped that a few years ago. So if you want to get the highest paying job as a software developer, you can apply for those jobs and get those jobs now, in the last holdouts, even without a university degree. So I think the jig is up. People kind of know it's garbage, but it'll still take a little bit longer. But it is something that, like, once you're looking back on it in hindsight, it will seem really obvious.
Yeah, I think so. I think, for a lot of these things that, I don't want to say they're not specialized, right? But like your software engineering and stuff like that, your lawyers and your doctors, that might have something, but I could see that being more of a apprenticeship trade specific type thing. You don't have to go through 4 years of your undergrad trying to, learn about African cuisine if you're going to go work on somebody's brain. And those are the last holdouts. And the only reason that if somebody said, I want to be a doctor, that university might be an option is because the government requires you to do it, right? It's a license. I don't think any of us would choose somebody with 12 years of experience that's actually been working with people and doing the work in an apprenticeship environment. We would choose that person over somebody that has a doctorate and maybe a year working in a hospital any day. So if you pick a career path where the only reason it's high paying and you have to get a certain set of education is because the government enforces it, it's probably not going to hold up over the next 30 years. There's too many other things that are going to chew into that. And you can't keep people like me from building software that makes you irrelevant, even if you have the government preventing people from competing, directly for a little bit longer. Yeah. So how did you learn to do some of that programming, to do some of that coding? Was that something you learned like in college, or?
No, I didn't learn it in college. It's something that I picked up on the job. I've been doing this for a while now. So it's probably not how I would recommend going about it, but I had I had enough of a skill set to where some of the big tech companies were willing to hire me. And then once I was there and I was, solving other problems, they basically just paid me to learn how to code. Now it's actually easier. I think now you could take 6 months or maybe a year if you're a little on the slow side. And if you just use the free online resources, like at that time when I was learning to code, I basically had like a college professor that we would go in, it was like you're on the job, but then you've got like 3 hours, like Tuesday and Thursday or something to go in for lectures. And then you have a bunch of homework sort of thing. So it was kind of like a university kind of experience inside Google. But now I would say that's not the ideal way to do it, because you don't need that. The resources that are available for free online are just as good, if not better, than what I got access to. You could do that and then immediately, get a job with that skill set.
I saw somebody else that kind of, they didn't do it quite that way, but it was, I think they might have, I don't know. They did basically the same thing where it was like, they learned to do a specific skill on the job, and it was, whether it was coding or engineering type stuff, but it was all that computer related thing. And was that, how long ago was that ballpark? I was just curious.
Like ballpark 20 years ago.
Okay.
So.
Is it, and now does the scene still kind of look like that, or was that kind of because of the time at which it was and things were developing, and there's a
It's a little bit different now. I think back then companies were doing a lot more training inside the company, but I don't think they were doing it as well as the stuff that's available now. So like now you have things like Stack Exchange, like any programming question that you can run into, somebody has asked and answered it, and it's free and it's available online. 20 years ago, that wasn't the case at all. And so you really kind of had to have more of a direct kind of mentorship experience, which made it slower. It wasn't necessarily better. So I'd say now it's a lot easier. And because of that, companies are expecting people to show up, with the skill set. Although I'm sure there's still exceptions. I'm sure there's still people that get hired to, do job A and then get encouraged to develop the skills. One of the things that I tell people a lot is that, especially early in your career, if they're only expecting you to work, 40 hours, work 47 hours and spend that extra 7 hours just developing your skill set. And if you take that approach instead of college and you maintain that for a few years, you're going to be way, way ahead of any of your competition. It's a lot easier to do that in context of a job where you can pick things that are actually in demand on the job that people would pay you to do and develop those skills.
So some of the free resources out there, one of them is your MathBot, right? So that is, I've played with it for a while. It's I don't know how long can you go? How far can you go with MathBot?
So right now we have up to exponents and roots. So you basically the way that the game works is you program a robot to solve math problems. So you're learning programming, you're learning some pretty complicated concepts like recursive programming or recursion. And that's where like a program calls itself in a loop until a certain circumstance. So that's something that, developers usually struggle with picking up those concepts. They're a little bit hard. They're not as simple as just like reading top to bottom down the page. So kids are picking that stuff up and they're going all the way through teaching the robot to, solve the square root of 9 or, I don't know, cube 2, stuff like that. And we're going further. So I would say within the next month or so, we should have 2-digit. So you'll be, working with 2-digit numbers. So it's pretty simple. It's pretty easy, but there's not a lot beyond like exponents and roots that you really, I think most kids need to learn in math. I think at that point you probably should be doing a lot more programming than math. Like, advanced calculus and other things are definitely helpful. And we plan to build up through calculus over time as we get it, get the user experience really dialed in for kids. But really by the time you get the concept of, exponents, you're pretty solid. If you really intuitively understand it, right? Like most people graduate high school or even college and still don't have an intuitive grasp of it. But if you've really got that stuff, you're the top 10%, I would say.
Yeah. So I guess what age would you start kids at, or when would you kind of introduce kids to this program?
Yeah, I would say it depends on the kid, but probably like from 5 to 7, I would say is probably about the right range. And the nice thing about it is that you can just introduce them to it and they can play with it. And if they like it, they'll continue to pass levels until they get to the point where their brain development kind of limits them, right? And then you can just bring them back to it in a month or two, and check in. Because unlike, most teachers, we're not trying to take credit for brain development. Their brains are going to grow if you just don't torture them and make them hate math. They'll be fine. So let them play when it's fun, and reward them. Give them an ice cream or something when they conquer a planet and learn a difficult concept. And re-suggest it periodically if they do get stuck. But other than that, it takes a lot of the pressure off.
Yeah, it's I enjoyed it. It was a little tedious in the beginning because I can do like little simple addition and stuff, but it was
right. You can count.
Yeah. So what spurred you on to develop MathBot?
Really just teaching my own kids math. I've got half a dozen little buggers that that have needed to learn math over the years. My oldest son, who's done a lot of the programming for MathBot, learned math and learned programming because I was able to hire a guy at Google to tutor him, and that was great. But it was a little pricey. It wasn't in the context of like private schools. It was probably $600 a month or something, really cheap. Um, but as we did that, we kind of figured out some things that we wanted. We wanted kids to learn as far as programming concepts and math, and we started just putting that into an application as we figured it out. Like for him, one of the things that we did is we went through Euclid's Elements, just the 2,000 plus year old book that pretty much everybody learned math on until the government decided to destroy mathematics, a few decades ago. And that was cool, but it was a little nicer to have a little slicker user experience, a little bit more automated. And I wanted to emphasize programming more with the younger kids. So that's really how I ended up with MathBot, is just really just working on my own curriculum over the last decade plus.
Okay, so I was going to say, ask how old it is. I guess over a decade. How long has it been live for?
It's really only been kind of in its current form for maybe 3 years, something like that. And it's changed a lot in the last couple of years. I would say 5 years ago, it wasn't really software. It was mostly physical objects that I was using with the kids, poker chips and things like that. It was only in the last few years that we realized that I was doing programming and I was doing math separately. But by combining them together, a lot of the stuff that's really tedious about math, you can program a robot to do the automated stuff. So you really get a much bigger bang for your buck if you do both at the same time. So that's really been in the last 3 to 4 years that we've been kind of focused on that approach. And the apps, I'd say, like, been respectable for 2 years now.
And one of the things is, homeschooling, you got your curriculums can add up, all those costs add up. So MathBot is free, right? I mean, there's nothing there at this point. So
and it always will be. I mean, it's totally free. It's it's definitely a passion project and something that we just want to do to help out little guys that, especially, one of the things that gets me particularly annoyed is medicating kids because they have high energy, and that happens a lot in public schools and private schools too, actually. And one of the big excuses is they can't concentrate on math. So being able to kind of take that gun out of people's hands is a big part of the motivation for building MathBot, because we've seen kids that are diagnosed with Asperger's or something, even crazier. And supposedly it's because they can't do math, and they'll just tear it up. They'll just jump into MathBot. And, when the teacher doesn't understand recursive programming, but the kid does, I think it makes it a little harder to justify, giving them a chemical lobotomy. So we're pretty motivated to try to take that or reduce that evil in the world. So it'll always be free. But we do hope that at some point to be able to release in-game rewards. So the idea is that a parent or a grandparent could put some money on MathBot, and we'll pass that on to the kids as they pass levels. So right now we have it set to where if you pass a level and you don't get any hints, you get all 3 stars, you would earn like 20 cents. So the idea is they could, if they master exponents, they can, buy a little toy or something. And when we do that, we'll hold back 10% of that just to fund the project and continue to be able to support going bigger with it. But that'll always be optional, and you can always do that manually, right? Like you can just you can keep track of, if you don't want to throw us the 10%, just keep track of how many levels the kids passed and then reward them. And that's totally great.
Awesome. That's great. Have you gotten much feedback from, homeschool parents or teachers or?
Yeah, we have. We've gotten in a couple homeschool magazines. I was on Tom Wood's podcast maybe a year ago, and that was great. I think we had over 1,000 people sign up in 24 hours from being a guest on his show. So yeah, we've definitely got some good feedback, and the nice thing about that is really it helps us figure out what's working well and what doesn't work well, and continue to change it. That's one of the great things about software is that if this was a textbook or something, we could put out an edition every year, but by making it in software and making it interactive, when people get stuck or it doesn't make sense, they can reach out to me on Twitter and we have a conversation and we push out something that works slightly different, a little improvement within a few days. Um, so it's getting better and better for sure.
Nice. Are there other, if kids are interested in coding or that sort of thing, are there other resources out there that you would recommend or point them towards that you know of offhand that are?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I would do is I would play all the levels in MathBot, and then go to Free Code Camp. So freecodecamp.org. Um, they have a bunch of different curriculum, a bunch of different programming sort of courses. But I would take the JavaScript track and go through that, and then at that point you're able to actually contribute to open source software. So then if you wanted to help build MathBot, um, we've got a handful of developers that are really great that work on that and are always happy to help out somebody junior make some fixes and get some experience. But there's a lot of open source projects that are like that, where you've got the old graybeard guy that's doing something like MathBot with me, where it's just his sort of hobby project that he really cares about. And if if somebody is willing to actually put some work in, even if it's just testing or like rewriting some text or any kind of contribution, when it's a volunteer effort, you get a big bang for your buck. Like, people will bend over backwards to help you get good at what you're trying to do. So that's the general path that I would tell people for software development as a career. There's also another thing that's kind of cool. I don't know how many other things are like this, but Lambda School, LAMBDA, I believe, Lambda School, is pretty interesting. And the basic idea is it's a boot camp where they teach you to code. I think you have to be in the Bay Area, but if I was completely disconnected from the software world and I had a teenager that was trying to get into this career path, I would check into it. But it's free. You don't have to pay for it. If they don't have a remote course, I'd nag them and say that they should. And they probably will now because of
Yeah.
but the idea is you don't pay, and then once you get a job, they get a chunk of your salary until you pay them back 15 grand or something. So that's a very cool approach, and will keep you out of any student loan debt and be a pretty good path to developing some good skills.
Look at that. Different ways to do things that are better for everybody. I like that. All right. And I don't know, I guess any thoughts? I mean, we talked a little bit about school there. Do you homeschool your guys?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, what I would say is if somebody isn't homeschooling, it's not like, I don't see it as homeschooling. I see it as parenting, right? So if you're going to outsource parenting to the government, when they're not really good at anything, right? You probably wouldn't want the government to be responsible for, I don't know, maintaining your house or anything else, right? Anything even much more petty. But if you put your kids in the hands of the government, whether it's a private or a public school, public schools are, obviously government, but private schools are also regulated, and there's so many details in how they're allowed to behave that are controlled by the government. You're really outsourcing parenting to the government. And I don't think anybody really thinks that's a good idea. I could see you being in a financial bind, or, wanting to sort of justify to yourself that maybe it's not that bad, but that's the cold hard truth. And you're going to get the results that you would expect from that situation. They're going to hate learning. They're, high percentage of them are not going to be really literate when they graduate. Like, come on.
Yeah.
At this point, it's really, really obvious that they keep lowering the SAT scores every year, and having to cook the books because this is not something they're good at. So yeah, I think you'd have to be. You're either in denial or psychotic if you're not homeschooling at this point.
It's kind of interesting, this whole COVID thing here. Kind of shutting down schools and forcing kids to stay home. And it's interesting to see this sort of outpouring of
terror
sound. Well, just like, I don't want to turn people off, but like this, wow, look at me. I homeschooled my kids. Like, we cooked today.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Like, you've done something that you should do as a parent. And like, people, we don't do those things anymore because we just pass it off to wherever they go after I drop them off at daycare in the morning, or wherever they go after they catch the bus on their own in the morning. And it's kind of like, it's great to see people coming in and having to do some of that homeschooling stuff. And I really hope some of it sticks and people kind of realize that you can do it. Homeschooling, it's out there. There are resources out there. There are free resources out there if you need them. It's doable. It's doable.
Yeah. I mean, I also feel for people that are kind of stuck on the treadmill, because it's like being in debt. If you have kids and they're raised by the state, they're not going to probably make a very reasonable income until much later in life, if ever. They're not going to be able to really afford to raise their own kids. They're going to have to put them in the cheap, low quality free daycare too. So it's just like this continual, cycle of dependence. So it is probably really hard to kick that for a lot of folks. And I don't mean to minimize it, but you need to, right? Like if you want your kid to be successful, you have to find a way to get them out of that environment, because they're not being set up for success, and your grandkids are not going to be in any better position than you were, or your kids are, unless you find a way to break out of that cycle. And there's a lot of free resources. It's still the real issue though, is that it's low quality free daycare in most cases. And but again, it's partly hard to provide for a family on one income because you had such poor education yourself. So it is definitely a trap, and I feel bad for people that are in it, but I think you got to see it for what it is before you're willing to try to fight out of it.
Yeah. It's choices, lots of choices, lots of sacrifices, and what matters at the end of the day, I guess. But anyway, so you mentioned it earlier, you're active on Twitter. Where can people go to find you on Twitter?
Let's see, what am I at? JW Weatherman _, I believe. JW Weatherman _. You can also find mathbot.com. And I've also got a website with some lectures on Bitcoin on 10hoursofbitcoin.com.
Okay. Yeah, because I will link to all that in the show notes, but I'll put your Twitter in there on the show notes, and then it's mathbot.com. Go there, sign yourselves up, and get your kids going, and that'll be there in the show notes. All right. Well, I appreciate your time, and I wish you luck out there. And
yeah, thanks a lot, man. It was a lot of fun chatting with you.
So that was JW, everybody. Mr. MathBot, Mr. Weatherman. I have to admit, when I saw his profile picture and, it's there on the podcast, I was a little apprehensive. I didn't know who I was going to be talking to. And turned out he's a great guy. Good stuff. Go check it out, mathbot.com. Your kids are home. They're probably playing a bunch of games. Give them something that is educational as well. Give them something that will help grow a tool, put an extra tool in their toolbox for when they get older. I know coding is something that I lack, and it's something that I wish I knew more about, to be honest. What goes on in this world that doesn't have a website or some sort of coding attached to it? So help your kids out and give them some MathBot. Anyway, guys, I think that'll do it for me today. Keep things short and concise. Go check out the show notes. Like I said, at the top of the show, homesteadsandhomeschools.com/063. Go check out MathBot and live your life, man. Live it and love it. Love everybody around you. Who knows what's going on with this thing out there? But in any event, maybe stay away from people that might be, might have a health risk. Come back next week. There will be more. There is more every week. Every week. There will be more. Because I love you guys. Why not? Anyway, folks, get out there, sow those seeds of liberty, and we can all reap sheaves of freedom together.
hustler's dream. I'm gonna ride a hustler's dream.